My name is Lorraine. I am 72 years old. I thought I had seen enough heartache in my life to never be shocked again. But one evening, my phone lit up, and what I heard broke something deep inside me. It was my daughter's voice, Emily. She had left me a voice message by mistake, one that she meant for her husband, Daniel. She did not realize her words would land in my ears. "Daniel, I can't do this anymore," she said, her tone sharp, impatient. "Having mother here is unbearable. She is always in the way. Carol told me the papers are almost ready. Once we have them signed, the house will be in our names. Then we can move her into the facility. She won't be able to object. Not with the medical report we prepared." My hand froze. The cup I was holding tapped hard against the kitchen table. A tiny crack along the rim of the porcelain sang out with a sharp sound. That sound cut into me as if it were my own chest breaking open. I sat there in my kitchen, staring at the phone screen, unable to breathe. For a long time, I could not move. My daughter's voice, once so sweet, so full of laughter when she was little, now sounded cold and calculating. I could barely whisper to myself. My daughter accidentally left me a voice message intended for her husband. What I heard about me made me walk out the next morning with a plan she could never stop. Emily, my only child. The same child who once drew me a crayon picture that said, "Mom, you are my hero." The same child I worked double shifts for. The same child I raised alone after her father died. She had been my reason for breathing, my reason for enduring. And now I was a burden. A piece of property standing between her and comfort. I leaned back, closing my eyes, and the thought repeated itself inside me, louder than her cruel words. My daughter once called me her hero. Now she calls me a burden. The weight of those words pressed on my chest, and yet, beneath the crushing sorrow, I felt something else stir. Something old, almost forgotten. A strength I had buried under years of sacrifice. Before I go on, let me pause and speak to you, the one listening right now. If you have ever been betrayed by the very people you gave your heart to, if you have ever felt invisible inside your own family, you will understand what I am about to share. And if this story moves you, I hope you will take a second to support me by liking this video, subscribing, and turning on the little bell icon so you never miss another story like this. Because what comes next is the quiet kind of justice no one ever sees coming. I set the phone down, the message still echoing in my mind. The kitchen felt colder than usual. My hands trembled, but my mind grew sharper. I replayed Emily's words in my head. The mention of Carol, Daniel's cousin, working at the county office. The medical report they prepared. The plan to move me into a nursing facility against my will. Piece by piece, the picture formed. They weren't just careless words in a moment of frustration. This was a plan made behind my back, with papers, with signatures, with lies stacked high enough to bury me alive in silence. I sat in the chair my mother once owned, and as I sat there, her voice returned to me, words she wrote in a letter decades ago, words I had read so many times I could recite them. "Lorraine, you may give away many things in this life, but never let anyone take away your dignity." That night, I did not sleep. I watched the shadows move across the walls, remembering the years I bent my back for Emily. The nights I washed other people's laundry so she could have new shoes for school. The morning I sold my wedding ring to pay her last college bill. The birthday cakes I baked when we had nothing else but flour and sugar. I gave her everything. And now she wanted to take away even the roof over my head. But grief did not swallow me. No, It carved me into someone sharper. I poured the cold coffee from the cracked cup into the sink, rinsed it, and set it carefully back on the counter. That crack was a reminder. Things can break and still hold. I whispered into the quiet kitchen, almost like a vow. Tomorrow morning, I walk out of here, and this time, Emily, it will not be on your terms. The plan had already begun forming in my mind, not a plan of anger, not one of screaming or fighting. No, my plan would be patient, precise, carved into paper, sealed with law, signed by justice itself. I picked up the phone one last time before midnight, staring at the glowing screen. Emily's message was still saved, her own voice ready to be played again. Evidence, not only of betrayal, but of intent. I pressed save, and I smiled, though it felt more like steel than joy. I was no longer just a mother waiting to be discarded. I was Lorraine, a woman who had given everything, and who had finally remembered the one thing she had left to give herself: her dignity. Tomorrow, the world would see that. My name is Lorraine, and before a single message broke my calm, my life was forged the slow way by heat and quiet pressure. I grew up in a mill town where steam hung over the laundromat my mother cleaned. When I did homework at the folding table, she handed me a porcelain cup with a chip at the rim and said, "Strong things can hold even with a crack." That cup was her gift. I kept it like a promise. I did not yet know how much I would need its lesson. I met Michael at 20. He was kind and steady. We married under a cedar in a borrowed backyard. The cake was boxed mix, the dress off the rack, and joy felt like something you could fold into a bag and carry home. When our daughter Emily arrived, a nurse laid her on my chest, and the world narrowed to a heartbeat. Michael was gone by the time Emily turned 8. A blood clot, a storm inside the body, the sort of sentence written without warning. After everyone left, I washed pans and told myself grief would not raise my child. I took the night shift at the laundromat where my mother once worked, then mornings at a diner. Double shifts, aching feet, bleach in my hair. I learned to measure time by cycles: wash, rinse, spin, homework, dinner, bedtime. I stretched ground beef with oats, stretched dollars with coupons, stretched patience with prayers over the sink. Emily grew tall and hungry for the world. I grew practical. I patched her jeans, patched a leaking roof, patched silence with small jokes so the house would not feel too empty. In 7th grade, Emily wanted the choir trip. There was a fee and a uniform skirt. I counted tips and came up short. That night, I took my wedding ring, the last gold I owned, and placed it on a velvet square at a pawn shop. The man wrote a number I did not like, and I nodded anyway. Emily sang under stage lights wearing a skirt that fit, and I sat in the 3rd row with the cracked cup between my hands, the tea cold because my throat was full. High school brought bigger bills. Emily needed lab fees, calculators, yearbooks. I learned to tell myself no. No new coat, no paint for the porch, no dentist until something hurt. When prom season arrived, she brought home a dress she could not afford and a face that tried not to hope. I told her to leave it on the bed while I figured things out. At the laundromat, Mrs. Patel, who owned the place, posted a sign for an overnight deep clean. The job meant hauling machines, scraping lime, scrubbing lint traps until my knuckles burned. I said yes before she finished asking. I mopped the back room, turned out pockets, found a handful of coins and a movie ticket stub that read, "Summer." In the morning, I had enough to make a down payment at the dress shop and a plan to pay the rest in 2 weeks. Emily twirled in our narrow hallway, the hem catching light. College was a mountain we climbed one bill at a time. Scholarships helped, but not enough. I sold the ring again for her first semester books. I took a weekend cleaning job at a medical office. I learned Bursar, FAFSA, payment plan. I learned that fear can sit under the tongue like a coin and still speak kindness around it. Through it all, I kept the house standing. The roof was patched, the porch painted 2 years late. I baked birthday cakes. Emily checked boxes on a ledger like we were conquering a continent. When she crossed the graduation stage, my knees went weak and my hands shook, and I held that cup like a reliquary. If you ask me what sacrifice feels like, I will tell you it feels like bleach on cracked hands and the click of a pawn shop door behind you. It tastes like instant coffee taken black because creamer is a luxury. It sounds like the hum of dryers at 2 a.m. and the soft snore of a child. It looks like a prom dress dripping on a shower rod and a ledger with more red lines than black. Before the message, that was my life. A narrow, sturdy road paved with small choices and blunt hope. I believed love and work could carry anyone to shore. I believed my daughter would always see me as the woman who lifted her over fences. In those years, I forgot one thing my mother taught me. You can give and still keep your dignity. The cup reminds me. It is cracked. It holds. When Emily and Daniel first carried their boxes through my front door, I thought it would be temporary. Their apartment was being repainted, they said. Just a few weeks, Mom. We'll help with the groceries, keep you company. I smiled and told them to use the guest room. It had been years since the house echoed with anyone's laughter besides my own. I admit, part of me was glad for the company. At first, it was small things. Emily moved my teapot from the lower shelf to the higher one. Safer up here, she said. You're not as steady as you used to be. Daniel changed the password on the Wi-Fi without telling me. Just streamlining, Mom. Don't worry, we'll set up your tablet. Their tone was sweet enough, but each act left a faint sting, like a paper cut. The nights grew odd. I would find Emily whispering on the phone in the kitchen, her back turned. Once, when I walked in, she snapped the folder shut on the table. Work forms, she said too quickly. I nodded. At 68, I had learned the power of silence. Sometimes you learn more by pretending you do not see. A week later, a doctor came by. A stranger in a white coat carrying a clipboard. Routine wellness check, Emily explained, her hand too firm on my elbow. I never asked for a doctor, but I let him in. He sat me down and asked questions with a rehearsed patience. Do you remember today's date? Can you count backwards from 100 by sevens? I answered carefully, eyes steady. 93, 86, 79. His pen scratched anyway, notes I could not read. When I asked why, he glanced at Emily. She smiled. Just making sure you're healthy, Mom. That night I couldn't sleep. I sat in the kitchen with my chipped porcelain cup. Steam rose, but my tea tasted of suspicion. My mother's words echoed. Strong things can hold, even with a crack. I held my tongue, but my mind sharpened. The manipulations thickened. At the grocery store, Emily slid items into the cart without asking. Organic this, imported that. At checkout, she used my debit card. Easier this way. Don't worry, I'll keep track. Later, when I asked for the card, she said she'd left it in her wallet for safekeeping. Daniel was worse. He wandered the house pointing out flaws. This roof won't last another season. At your age, repairs are overwhelming. Maybe it's time to consider something smaller, easier. He said it like concern, but I heard the undertone. He left my door half closed when I went to bed, as if to remind me I wasn't alone or free. One afternoon, I overheard them in the yard, Daniel's voice low, annoyed. She doesn't suspect. Carol said the paperwork just needs her name. 2 more. Weeks Emily hushed him, noticing me through the window. When she came inside, she handed me a plate of fruit. Too bright. Too sweet. You need vitamins, Mom. They thought age made me soft. That quiet meant weak. But quiet is sometimes a ledger. And I was taking note. The doctor's visit. The hidden folder. The vanished debit card. None of it loud, all of it heavy. Neighbors noticed, too. Rose, who lived next door, leaned over the fence one evening. Haven't seen you much lately, Lorraine. Everything all right? I opened my mouth to answer, but stopped. Emily's silhouette filled the kitchen window, arms crossed. I gave Rose a small smile and said, I'm fine. Silence again, my oldest ally. I lay awake that night, replaying every small trespass. The chipped cup sat on my nightstand. I touched the crack with my thumb. It had survived my mother's hands, my daughter's childhood, my widowhood. It had not broken, neither had I. For now, I let them believe I was yielding, distracted. I listened more, spoke less. I did not yet know the full shape of their plan, but I felt it circling, like a draft under a locked door. I sipped my tea, the porcelain warm against my palm, and told myself, hold, Lorraine. Hold until the right moment. Mildred lives 2 doors down, the kind of neighbor who remembers trash day and the names of everyone's grandchildren. In early spring, we stood by the fence admiring her azaleas, and she nodded toward my house with a pleased smile. You are lucky, Lorraine. A daughter who checks in, a son-in-law who fixes things. That is rare. I tucked a loose hair behind my ear and said what polite mothers say. Yes, I am lucky. The word felt like a coat I had outgrown, still hanging on my shoulders out of habit. Mildred has a way of taking people at their best. She bakes for block parties, pins recipes to the community board, and makes every misstep sound like a near win. When Emily and Daniel moved in for a few weeks, Mildred waved from her porch. How wonderful, she called. Family under one roof. I waved back with the hand that was not holding a grocery sack and tried to believe her. We crossed paths often that month. She would bring me extra basil. I would offer her laundry tips that save $1. Mildred is widowed too. She understands the quiet that settles after dusk. She never pries, but she notices. She noticed when my Wi-Fi name changed to something I did not set. She noticed when Emily started parking in my spot and I left my car at the curb. Small things, Mildred said one afternoon, shrugging off her cardigan. Children forget themselves sometimes. I nodded. Small things can still bruise. The invitation to Daniel's birthday came as an announcement instead of a question. Emily set a folded menu on the counter. 6 o'clock at Martin's, she said. We have a big table. Dress nice. She did not meet my eyes. I ironed a blouse, wrapped a tie I could barely afford, and left early. At the sink, I rinsed my cracked porcelain cup and set it to dry, the small fracture catching a line of light like a scar. Martin sits downtown under a canopy of string lights. I arrived with time to spare and waited on the bench outside, gift bag at my feet. The air smelled of garlic and sweetness. Through the window, I could see tables pushed together, waiters balancing plates on palms. I watched the door every time it opened. Twice I rose, thinking I heard my name, and twice I sat again, smoothing my skirt. At 6:15, I texted Emily. At 6:25, I called. No answer. A young couple walked past with a cake box, laughing, and I smiled out of muscle memory. At 6:30, a server stepped outside to shake the crumbs off a tray. "Party for Daniel?" he asked, checking the list. He pointed inside without looking up. Back dining room. From the sidewalk, I could see them now. Emily's head thrown back in laughter. Daniel with a paper crown someone must have thought would be amusing. Carol from the county office pouring wine. There were balloons tied to chairs. The tie I had wrapped inside tissue paper felt heavier than a stone. Mildred came down the street at that moment, a grocery tote on her arm. She followed my line of sight, and her smile faltered. "Lorraine," she said gently, "are you waiting to go in?" "I am early," I said, and heard the thinness in my own voice. She peered through the glass, then looked at me again. She read something in my face that words would have muddied. Mildred is kind, but she is not naive. "Do you want me to walk in with you?" she asked, already angling her body toward the door as if she could open it wide enough to make the night smaller. "I will wait," I said. "Give them a minute." We sat together on the bench. She set the tote between us like a small, decent wall. Through the window, a candle appeared, then a chorus. "Happy birthday." Someone clapped. Someone else lifted a phone to record the moment. There was no empty chair at the table. Mildred watched, then turned back to me, her eyes careful. "I told you once you were lucky," she said quietly. "I may have been wrong." I let the words land. No defense, no excuse. The night cooled on my skin. An hour is a long time to sit with what you know and what you wish were true. At 7:10, I stood. I handed Mildred the gift bag. "Would you mind returning this to me tomorrow?" I said, "if it turns out they did not need it tonight." She rose with me, her mouth set. "Lorraine, this is not forgetfulness. This is something else." "Yes," I said, "it is something else." I walked home without calling again. In the kitchen, I reached for the cup on the rack and wrapped both hands around it, though the tea inside was only in my imagination. The crack was thin, steady, proof that damage can exist without collapse. Across the shared fence, the azaleas were closing their flowers for the night. Mildred's porch light flicked on. She was there, a silhouette in her doorway, not waving, not asking for details, simply present. The next morning, she knocked and left a note. "I am here. I do not believe the story they will tell." Her handwriting was round, the kind of script learned when schools still taught patience. I tucked the note inside the drawer with the coupons and the spare keys. A ledger does not have to be numbers. Sometimes it is names, dates, and a simple line. Witnessed. Emily chose her words carefully, like a person placing traps under leaves. We were sitting in my living room, the blinds half drawn against the late afternoon sun. She had a brochure folded in thirds, edges already soft from being carried in her purse. She slid it across the coffee table toward me. "Mom, maybe you should just look at this. St. Joseph's has excellent ratings. They even have garden clubs and piano nights." Her smile was thin, rehearsed. Daniel nodded along, pretending to read the sports section. I picked up the brochure. The paper was glossy, filled with staged photographs of silver-haired men playing chess, women in pastel sweaters laughing with nurses. All the faces seemed lit from the same artificial lamp. I ran my finger down the page until it caught on the fold, a sharp line that felt like a cut. "You're independent, Mom," Emily continued, her voice syrupy. "But you forget things sometimes. And it's such a big house. We just want you safe. You deserve care." The words stuck like a fishbone. That evening, after they left for a dinner reservation they had not invited me to, I drove past St. Joseph's. The building rose behind iron gates, brick walls trimmed with hedges too neat to be real. A banner read, "Where golden years shine brighter." I parked at the curb and held the brochure in my lap. My cracked porcelain cup was in the cup holder, the faint line glinting in the dashboard light. I lifted it, empty, and thought about my mother, who had scrubbed laundry until her hands split, who never once suggested her old age belonged anywhere but her own kitchen. The entrance doors slid open automatically as if they expected me. Warm light spilled onto the sidewalk. I stepped out of the car and walked forward until I stood at the threshold. The mat beneath my shoes said "Welcome home." I did not move. Inside, I could see a woman in a wheelchair rolling slowly toward the dining hall, pushed by a young aide in blue scrubs. A smell of disinfectant mixed with something sweet drifted out each time the doors parted. Voices echoed faintly, laughter layered with coughs. I held the brochure tighter. Private suites, memory care, 24-hour nursing. I imagined myself in those photographs, smiling, sweatered, supervised. A life measured by activity calendars and medication rounds. My chest tightened. I thought of the chipped cup waiting in my kitchen sink, of the cedar tree where I had married Michael, of the porch where I taught Emily to braid her hair. I am not ready to disappear, I whispered, though no one was near enough to hear. The words felt like a vow scratched into stone. A young receptionist at the desk inside spotted me and waved, friendly, beckoning me closer. Her gesture was gentle, harmless. Still, my feet refused to cross the line. I stood there, toes on the edge of the mat, the glass doors breathing open and closed with mechanical patience. "Step in," they seemed to say. "Step in and surrender." But I turned. My heels clicked against the pavement, each step deliberate. The doors hissed shut behind me, sealing in the curated smiles. Back in the car, I unfolded the brochure flat across the steering wheel. The crease was a scar down the center, splitting cheerful promises in half. I pressed the paper until it bent backwards. The fold weakened. Then I slid it into the glove compartment and shut it hard. On the drive home, the radio played an old song Michael used to hum while sanding the porch. My throat ached, but I sang along, steady and clear. When I reached my kitchen, I washed the cup and set it on the counter. The crack was still there, unbroken. I dried it slowly, as if handling porcelain was the same as handling memory, dignity, the last threads of choice. Emily wanted me to cross that threshold, to step into a place where she could rewrite my story as frail and fading. Instead, I walked back into my own house, into the silence I chose. That night, as the refrigerator hummed and the clock ticked, I promised myself, I will hold the line until the truth demands its day. I could not sleep that night. The house felt hollow, though Emily and Daniel were under the same roof. Their whispers drifted down the hallway, broken by sudden silence whenever I stepped close. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the hum of the refrigerator carrying through the floorboards. Every sound seemed sharpened, every shadow more present. I turned on the lamp and pulled open the drawer of my nightstand. That was where I kept the things I could not throw away. Inside lay photographs yellowing at the edges, a rosary missing 2 beads, and 1 envelope with my mother's handwriting. She had written it when she was already sick, her hands trembling, but her words steady. For years, I had been afraid to read it more than once. Tonight, I needed her voice. The paper was fragile when I unfolded it, But the ink was still dark. "My dearest Lorraine," it began, "if you are reading this, I am gone from this world. You were always strong, but you gave too much of that strength to others. Promise me one thing. Never let anyone take away your dignity. Money can be replaced, houses rebuilt, but a woman's dignity is her last defense. Even if the thief is your own blood, hold the line. You are worth more than they know." I traced her signature with my finger. My mother had worked herself raw so I could have shoes without holes, books without stains. She had warned me about giving until nothing remained. I had not listened. I had believed sacrifice would guarantee gratitude. I had believed love returned in the same measure it was given. Tonight, her words rang like a bell in an empty church. I pressed the letter against my chest. For a moment, I could smell her soap, lavender and starch, faint and gone. The clock on the wall ticked louder, every second a hammer. I sat there until the room blurred and cleared again. At 2 a.m, I lit the small lamp in the kitchen. The porcelain cup was on the counter where I had left it. I filled it, not with tea, but with water. Plain, cool, sharp against my throat. I held it carefully, thumb over the crack. "Mother," I whispered into the stillness, "you were right. I nearly let them write me off like an old bill. I spread papers across the table. Bank statements, utility bills, the mortgage deed. Emily had been too curious about these, moving them, rearranging them, sometimes sliding them into folders she claimed were for safekeeping. I studied every line until the numbers steadied in my head. My daughter thought I was forgetting, but I remembered. I remembered down to the dollar. At 3, I opened the hall closet and pulled down the lockbox. Inside were my mother's bracelets, a few savings bonds, and the deed to the house. My pulse beat in my ears. The thought of Emily holding forged papers, Daniel whispering about signatures, filled me with a fury that warmed my bones. I laid everything on the table and wrote my own notes in the margins. Not frantic scribbles, but deliberate lines. Dates, names, amounts. I underlined each with a ruler. Quiet preparation has its own power. By 4, I had stacked the evidence neatly, tied it with string, and set it beside the cup. I sat back and let the silence surround me. I had spent decades enduring, thinking patience was a virtue. Now I understood. Endurance without boundaries is surrender. The letter lay open beside me. I read the final lines again. You are worth more than they know. Tears blurred the ink. I wiped them away, but I did not fold the paper. I left it spread like a witness. When dawn broke, the first light slid across the kitchen floor. I was still sitting there, hair uncombed, spine straight. The world outside was ordinary. Birds, a passing truck, the rustle of leaves. But inside, something had shifted. I looked toward the hallway where Emily and Daniel slept. My jaw tightened. "They think I am soft," I whispered. "They think age makes me silent." They are wrong. I gathered the papers, placed the letter back in its envelope, and slid it into my purse. The porcelain cup I washed, dried, and placed carefully in the cupboard. It would not leave this house, not yet. When I finally stood, my legs were steady. My decision was carved into me like initials in oak. I would act. Not with shouting, not with pleas. With the law, with proof, with the dignity my mother told me never to surrender. The night had been long, but it had delivered clarity. My daughter thought she could erase me with signatures and whispers, but I was awake now, and I had a plan. I woke before the alarm and dressed with the calm of a verdict. From the back of my closet, I took the red suit I had saved from Emily's graduation. The fabric still held a faint memory of applause. I pressed the lapels, pinned my mother's small pearl at the collar, and stood until my shoulders settled where they belonged. Low heels, leather purse, no ornament that could rattle. This was a day for paper and spine. In the kitchen, I touched the rim of my cracked porcelain cup and left it drying on the rack. It belonged to the house. It would keep watch. I locked the door, stepped into the chill of morning, and drove to the bank I had used since Emily was in middle school. The lobby smelled of lemon polish. A poster promised security. I asked the teller for the branch manager. A woman in a navy blazer appeared. I knew her from years of deposits. "Good morning, Miss Whitlow," she said. "I'm Nora Benton." "What can I do for you?" I sat across from the desk. "Ms. Benton, I need to review all inquiries and authorizations on my accounts for the last 6 months. I also need beneficiary changes and new security controls. I believe there has been unauthorized access under a forged document." Her eyes shifted, quick and professional, like a nurse when a pulse jumps. "We can do that," she said, drawing the keyboard close. "May I see your ID?" I set my license beside a stack I had marked in pencil. She studied both and nodded. "You came prepared." "I have been preparing for decades," I said. On her screen, she scrolled, frowning. 2 external inquiries by an authorized helper. There is also a letter on file granting view access to your daughter, Emily Hart. She clicked. A scanned PDF opened. She turned the monitor toward me. "Is this the document?" My name sat under a paragraph of legal phrases. Above it, a thin, leaning signature that looked like mine, only to a stranger. The notary stamp was real. The hand was not. The date was last month, the day after they moved into my guest room. "That is not my hand," I said. "I never lean right. I make a square L. I do not cross an R like that. Whoever wrote this has never watched me pay a bill." Nora leaned closer, then back. Her eyes met mine. Something moved from polite service to resolve. "Understood. I am flagging this as suspected forgery and notifying compliance. With your permission, I will revoke and freeze all third-party access." "You have it," I said. "Open new accounts. Place a fraud alert on the old. No online changes without in-person verification. 2-factor by landline only. Issue new cards." She smiled, small and approving. "You know the vocabulary." "My life taught me," I said. "Now let it serve me." She made calls, her tone turning crisp. She printed forms and a temporary card, then handed me a pen. "Initial here to confirm you did not authorize this letter." "We will attach your signature card for comparison," I signed with deliberate strokes, the way my mother taught me at a kitchen table. Nora filed the pages and printed a receipt with the case ID. "If anyone calls pretending to be you, we will ask for the new code. Without it, nothing moves." "Good," I said. "I also want a safe deposit box. I am placing my deed and bonds in it today." "We have availability," she said, standing. "Follow me." Down a hallway, past a calendar, we reached the vault. The metal door opened with an obedient sigh. In a private room, she set a slim drawer on the table and handed me keys. "2 signatures required each time," she said. "Yours is the one that matters." I placed the deed in the box, then the savings bonds, then a copy of my mother's letter sealed in plastic. When the lid closed, air reached the bottom of my lungs. Back at her desk, Nora clasped her hands. "Ms. Whitlow, I know this is difficult. Do you feel safe at home?" "I feel awake," I said, "and I will be safer by the hour." She held my gaze, then slid a card across. My direct line. If anything strange happens, call me first. I will document everything. I tucked the card beside the case receipt. Thank you, I said. You have done more than your job. You did the hard part, she said. You came in. As I stood, I caught my reflection in the dark window. The red suit did not shout. It remembered. It remembered a day I celebrated my daughter's future. Today, it marked the day I reclaimed my own. Outside, the morning had warmed. I paused on the steps, opened my purse, and set my phone to record. Evidence begins as a choice. I chose to keep everything. I chose to stand up without raising my voice. Power lives in paper, in names written straight, in boundaries spoken like simple sentences. I walked to the car with the lightness of someone carrying weight properly. When the engine answered, I set the folder on the passenger seat like a companion and drove home. Red sleeves quiet against the wheel. A woman moving from vulnerable to sovereign in the span of a morning. I chose the county office on a Thursday morning when the lines were thin. I wore the same red suit, pressed crisp, my mother's pearl at the collar. My purse felt heavier than usual, though inside it carried only what mattered: the bank receipts, my identification, and my phone with one recording saved. The clerk directed me down a hall lined with notices: tax sales, zoning changes, a flyer for a county fair. At the end was a door with frosted glass, property records, and probate. Behind it sat Carol, Daniel's cousin, her desk piled with folders that leaned like tired buildings. She looked up when I entered, surprise flickering before she fixed her face into professional cheer. "Lorraine, what a pleasant surprise," she said. "Did Emily send you?" I set my purse gently on the chair opposite. "No, I came on my own." She shifted, smoothing her blouse. "What can I help you with today?" I did not answer right away. Instead, I opened my purse, pressed one button on my phone, and set it face down on the desk. The red light blinked. A second later, Emily's voice filled the room, sharp and unmistakable. "Carol told me the papers are almost ready. Once we have them signed, the house will be in our names. Then we can move her into the facility. She won't be able to object, not with the medical report we prepared." The words played in the small office like a confession carved in air. Carol's face drained of color. Her hand flew to the stack of folders, as if covering them would erase what we both had heard. "Lorraine," she began, but her voice cracked. She reached for a tissue, missing the box the first time. I never meant for it to go this far." I stayed silent. Silence was not emptiness. It was weight. I let it fill the room until her shoulders bent under it. She pressed the tissue to her eyes. "Emily asked me for help. She said it was just a form, something routine. She said you agreed. When I saw the signature, I knew. I knew it wasn't yours. But Daniel insisted. He said families keep things quiet. He promised no one would be hurt. Still, I did not speak. My silence was the knife she had sharpened herself. Her tears slid down her cheek, darkening the collar of her blouse. They made me draft the power of attorney. I backdated the notary. I used my access to pull your medical file. Then Daniel added notes. They wanted to show early memory loss. I told myself it was just paperwork, but I knew. I folded my hands in my lap. My heartbeat was steady, my breath even. She looked at me like a student waiting for punishment. "Please," she whispered. I could lose my job. My license. Everything. I leaned forward just enough to rest my elbows on the desk. "You already lost something. I said softly. You lost yourself the moment you chose convenience over integrity. She sobbed openly then, the sound of paper tearing. What do you want from me? I lifted my phone, stopped the recording, and slid it into my purse. Not what you think. I don't want revenge. I want the truth written down, every file you forged, every note you altered. I want copies, originals, dates, names, and you will give them to me now. Her hands trembled as she opened drawers, pulling folders one by one. She placed them on the desk as though laying down contraband. This is everything, she said. The draft deed transfer, the false medical evaluation, the power of attorney. I'll print certified copies. I'll sign statements. I nodded once. Good. The printer hummed, spitting pages like confessions. She signed each one, her signature quivering. I watched without blinking. My silence wrapped around her until she flinched at the scratch of her own pen. When the last page lay before me, I slipped it into a folder and closed it with deliberate care. Carol, I said, my voice steady, you chose family over law, but you chose the wrong family. You forgot I am still here. She covered her face with both hands. I'm sorry. I rose, tucking the folder into my purse. Keep your sorrow. I will keep the evidence. At the door, I paused, hand on the knob. One more thing. If Emily or Daniel pressure you again, remember this day. Remember that silence does not protect you. It only makes you complicit. She nodded, unable to meet my eyes. Outside, the hallway smelled of ink and dust. I walked slowly, the red suit whispering against my legs, the folder secure in my purse. For the first time in weeks, my steps rang clear. The threshold had shifted. I was no longer the woman being moved like a pawn. I was the hand holding the board. By the time I reached the parking lot, the sun was high. I opened the car door, set the folder on the seat beside me, and exhaled. My mother's words echoed again. Never let anyone take away your dignity. Today, I had obeyed. The law office sat on the corner of Main Street, an old brick building with blinds drawn against the morning sun. I had called ahead, and the secretary led me past rows of filing cabinets to a room that smelled faintly of leather and ink. Behind the desk sat Harold Foster, a man in his late 60s with silver hair combed back and glasses perched low. His reputation stretched across the county, meticulous, unshaken, and known for winning battles before they reached the courtroom. He gestured toward the chair across from him. Mrs. Whitlow, please sit. I placed my purse on the floor, set the heavy folder on the desk, and pushed it toward him. This is everything, I said. Forged documents, false reports, and a recording of my daughter's voice. I don't want noise, Mr. Foster. I want justice. On paper, black and white. His eyebrows lifted slightly, but he did not speak. Instead, he opened the folder and began to read. Page after page, he studied signatures, notary stamps, medical evaluations. He played the recording twice, eyes fixed on the desk, listening as Emily's voice filled the room. Each word landed heavier the second time. When the last page was set down, he leaned back, folding his hands. His voice was dry, measured. You are not only dealing with betrayal, Mrs. Whitlow. You are dealing with criminal fraud, forgery, conspiracy, abuse of power. This is not a family misunderstanding. This is a case. I looked at him steadily. I don't want a circus. I don't want gossip in the paper. I want safety. I want the deed to remain mine, my account secured, and my dignity intact. Nothing more, nothing less. He studied me, as if measuring the steel under my words. Most people who come in here with evidence like this want revenge. They want spectacle. You don't know, I said. I want peace. But I won't purchase peace with silence. He nodded slowly, tapping a pen against the desk. Then we proceed with precision. First, we will file a petition with the court to freeze any transfers connected to your estate. We will submit affidavits proving forgery and false medical documentation. Second, we'll notify the licensing board. Carol will be compelled to testify. Third, we'll prepare a civil claim if necessary. You will not need to shout. The paper will do the shouting. I felt the weight of his words settle into me. The law, like silence, could cut without raising its voice. Tell me honestly, I asked, how strong is this? He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the desk. Mrs. Whitlow, this is more than strong. You have not only a case, you have a lesson for society. Too often, older women are cornered by those closest to them. Families hide it under the word care when it is theft in disguise. What you hold here forces light onto that shadow. I pressed my hands together in my lap. I never wanted to be a symbol. I only wanted to be a mother. And you still are, he said gently. But now you are also something else. Proof that betrayal can be answered without screaming. Proof that dignity is not fragile. You will give courage to others who are quiet and afraid his words cut deeper than comfort. They drew something from me I had kept hidden. The fear of becoming invisible, of vanishing while still alive. I cleared my throat. What comes next? He outlined the steps carefully. Notarized statements, chain of custody for documents, a motion to seal my accounts, subpoenas for Carol and Daniel. His tone was steady, like a man who had fought many battles and knew the terrain by heart. Will Emily face charges? I asked. If the district attorney accepts the case, yes. But you will decide how far we push. Criminal, civil, or only protective. The choice is yours. I sat back, the red suit pulling at my shoulders. I will choose the path that ends with the truth on record. If society learns from my pain, let it be written down. But I will not be dragged into spectacle. He gave the faintest smile, spoken like someone who already knows her verdict. We shook hands, his grip firm. I will prepare the filings by Monday. Until then, guard your papers and keep your composure. You've already shifted the balance. Now let the system do its work. I stood, collected my purse, and thanked him. On the sidewalk outside, the air felt clearer. For the first time, I did not feel like a pawn in my daughter's plans. I felt like a woman who had placed her story in ink, where no whisper could erase it. When I returned home from Harold Foster's office, the house felt different. The same walls, the same furniture, but the weight in the air had shifted. I carried my purse straight to the bedroom and slid the folder beneath the cedar chest. The papers no longer felt like a shield I clutched in, fear. They were a sword resting quietly, ready. From the kitchen I heard voices, Emily and Daniel, low but tense. I walked in slowly, not rushing, not announcing myself. They were seated at the table, a pile of envelopes between them. She doesn't suspect, Daniel said, his voice sharp. Carol said everything's locked in. We just need her signature on one more thing. Emily sighed, rubbing her forehead. It's harder than I thought. She's stubborn. Yesterday she looked at me like she knew, but she can't. She forgets too much. Their words should have split me open. Instead, they passed over me like dull knives. I had already seen the truth written in Carol's trembling hand, already heard Harold's dry assurance. I was not broken. Not anymore. I moved to the counter, set down my keys, and filled the kettle. They both looked up, startled, but I said nothing. Only the whistle of the kettle answered their silence. "Mom," Emily said carefully, "we were just talking about bills. It's complicated. You wouldn't understand." I reached for my porcelain cup, the one with the crack along the rim. I poured the steaming water, added coffee grounds the way I always had, and stirred. The spoon clinked steady against the ceramic. I did not look at her. Daniel cleared his throat. "Maybe it's time to think about St. Joseph's again. You'd be comfortable there." Less stress, I raised the cup, sipped, and let the silence sit heavy. Not a pause, not confusion, deliberate silence, strong enough to press against their skin. Emily's voice cracked first. "Mom, did you hear us?" I set the cup down gently. The crack caught the light like a scar made holy. I smoothed my hand across the counter, wiped a stray drop, and stayed quiet. Emily shifted in her chair, nerves slipping into her tone. "You always said communication is important. Say something." Still, I drank my coffee. The bitterness steadied me. My silence grew roots in the floorboards. Daniel pushed his chair back. "She's playing games," he muttered. But they both watched me, unsettled. I had always been the one to fill quiet with explanations, with reassurances, with apologies. Today, I offered them nothing. Inside, I thought of Harold's words. "The paper will do the shouting." I did not need to raise my voice. I only needed to hold the line. I rinsed the cup, dried it, and set it back on the shelf. Each movement slow, deliberate, as if I were turning the world one notch at a time. Emily rose halfway, then sat again. Her eyes darted to Daniel. "She's not herself," Daniel whispered. I let the words hang, unchallenged. The silence made them echo wrong, exposed for what they were, lies spoken to convince themselves. Finally, Emily reached across the table. "Mom, we're just trying to help. You know that, don't you?" I met her gaze, not with anger, but with a calm that unsettled her more. I did not nod. I did not speak. I let her see her, reflection in my quiet. She pulled her hand back as though the table burned. The clock ticked louder than our breathing. The refrigerator hummed. Outside, a bird called. In that moment, I felt the shift. The power no longer sat in their hands. It sat in mine, in the silence I chose and they could not bear. I left the kitchen without a word, my heels steady against the floor. In the hallway, I paused, listening. Emily whispered, "She knows." Daniel did not answer. Upstairs, I sat on the edge of my bed, the red suit still hanging in the closet, the folder safe under the cedar chest, and my mother's letter folded neatly in my purse. I thought of the cracked cup, drying in the rack below. Broken, yet whole. Quiet, yet indestructible. That night, when I lay in the dark, I did not feel small. I felt the silence around me like armor. They had spoken of me as if I were invisible. Now it was their turn to sit in uncertainty, their words falling useless against a woman who no longer replied. The silence was not emptiness. It was a verdict waiting to be read. Emily texted me early. "Meet me at the front gate of St. Joseph's. Quick tour. No pressure." She added a smile that did not sound like her. I waited an hour before replying, yes. Agreeing cost me nothing. Stepping inside would cost me the shape of my life. I put my mother's letter in my purse and left the red suit in the closet. Today needed plain clothes and a steady spine. The facility sat behind a neat brick wall trimmed with hedges that looked ironed. A blue banner waved above the drive, where golden years shine brighter. The parking lot smelled of mulch and disinfectant. A glass vestibule opened and closed like a lung. I stood at the curb and watched the door breathe, in and out, patient as the tide. Emily hurried up the walkway, hair smooth, voice bright. "There you are." "Perfect timing. The community director can meet us. 5 minutes tops." She pressed a brochure into my hand as if passing a communion wafer. "They have bingo, art classes, even a dog therapy day. You'll love the garden." I unfolded the paper. I had seen the same posed smiles before. "I thought you said no pressure," I said, keeping my voice even. "Of course," she laughed, too high. "It's just a look. You keep forgetting appointments, and this place could help. Memory care is gentle here." She touched my elbow. I stepped 1 inch to the side. We reached the threshold, a thin strip of metal between sidewalk and vestibule. The mat said, "Welcome home." Through the glass, I saw a man sleeping in a chair, his mouth open like a door left ajar. A nurse adjusted a clipboard. A cart rolled past with cups of something thick and beige. The air that leaked out carried a lavender sweetness that did not belong to flowers. Emily angled toward the handle. "Ready?" I stopped at the bared edge of the mat. A memory rose clean and sudden. The day Michael carried Emily across the porch when she was 2. The day I crossed a pawn shop threshold to sell my ring. The morning I first walked into the laundromat to ask for a second shift. Doors divide the life you had from the life you have next. Some deserve to be crossed. Some are walls pretending to be kindness. Emily noticed I had not moved. "Mom?" I looked at my shoes, then at the sun flicking off the glass. "You worry I will lose my mind," I said quietly. "I worry I will lose myself." She blinked. The brightness in her face flickered. "No one is taking anything from you. This is supportive living." "I hear the word living," I said, "but all I see is supervision." The doors sighed open, then closed again, without me. "I will not trade my keys for schedules." She tried a lighter tone. "Let's just meet the director." 5 minutes. We can grab a cappuccino afterward. There's a cafe, a young receptionist waved from inside, friendly as a Sunday usher. I lifted my purse higher on my shoulder. "I will stand here and breathe air that is mine," I said. "If you want to go in, go." Emily lowered her hand. Cars moved along the boulevard behind us, indifferent. She shifted to persuasion, to pleading, to the small guilt tricks children learn when they become adults too fast. "I'm trying to help. You know that, right?" Help would have felt like a ride to the farmer's market or a hand with the gutters. This felt like a gate. "I am not a problem to be placed," I said. "Not today." Silence stretched between us, thin and tight. She looked through the glass as if the right staff member might appear and undo my refusal. No one came. A sparrow hopped at the edge of the mat, cocked its head, then fluttered away. I folded the brochure and handed it back. "Keep this," I said. "It belongs with the person who needs convincing." Emily stared at the paper, then at me. "What am I supposed to tell Daniel?" "Tell him I am standing," I said. "Tell him I remember." I stepped backward, off the mat, onto the sidewalk where the air moved honest, and the sun warmed my face. The doors breathed once more and sealed themselves, content without me. I turned toward the parking lot, each step measured, light in the way a decision can be light. The second threshold had held. I was still on my side of myself. The morning it happened was ordinary in every visible way. The sun slid across the curtains, the kettle whistled, and the porcelain cup with its thin crack sat waiting on the counter. But the wait in the house was not ordinary. I had made the calls. I had arranged the timing. Today, silence would end, and the truth would speak. A knock sounded at the door just past 9. Emily, still in her robe, frowned and shuffled down the hall. Daniel followed, annoyed at the interruption. When Emily opened the door, her face went pale. 2 uniformed officers stood there, and behind them, Harold Foster with his leather briefcase. "Mrs. Whitlow?" one officer asked politely. I stepped into the foyer, dressed in my red suit, my mother's pearl at my collar. "Yes, this is my home. Please come in." Emily's voice rose sharp. "Mom, what is this? Why are the police here?" Harold adjusted his glasses. "We're here to review some matters concerning property and guardianship." "Everyone will have a chance to speak." Daniel bristled. "This is unnecessary." "It's a family misunderstanding." I walked past them into the living room, motioning for the officers and Harold to sit. The cracked cup rested on the coffee table, filled with dark coffee. Emily and Daniel remained standing, arms crossed, eyes darting between themselves. I reached into my purse, pulled out my phone, and pressed play. Emily's own voice filled the room, sharp and unmistakable. "In 1 month, she'll be in the facility. The house will be ours." The words landed heavy. Daniel's jaw tightened. Emily's hands flew to her face. "That's not, Mom, that's not the whole context." I raised my hand. Silence. The officers leaned forward slightly. Harold tapped his pen against his notebook. Emily stammered. You recorded me by accident. That's illegal." "No," Harold interrupted dryly. "This was a voicemail left unintentionally but received lawfully. Perfectly admissible, I let the silence grow until it cut sharper than shouting." Emily's breathing turned ragged. Daniel muttered under his breath. "She set us up." Another knock at the door. One officer opened it, and Carol entered, her eyes red, a folder in her hands. She looked smaller than the last time I saw her, as if confession had already thinned her. Harold gestured. "Mrs. Carol Henson has provided sworn statements." "She is here to confirm them." Carol clutched the folder. I drafted the papers, the false medical report, the power of attorney." Daniel pushed. Emily begged. "I signed things I should never have touched. I can't carry it anymore." Her voice cracked. "I'm sorry, Lorraine." "I'm so sorry." Emily spun toward her cousin. "How could you—" Carol flinched. "Because it was wrong. And she deserves better." The officers exchanged glances. One took the folder from Carol, flipping through stamped pages. The other noted times and signatures. Daniel tried again, his tone shifting to false calm. "We were only trying to secure the property. For her benefit, to keep it safe." "Families do this all the time." I lifted the cup, sipped, and set it down. "Families protect each other. They do not prepare to erase each other." Emily's tears spilled. "Mom, please, this isn't what you think." I was scared. "You forget things. I thought—" I held her gaze, my voice steady. "You thought wrong. You thought I would surrender my life quietly. You thought love could be twisted into permission silence again. Heavy, deliberate. The kind that makes liars break." Emily dropped into a chair, covering her face. Daniel remained, standing, fists tight, but words gone. Carol sat, trembling, whispering to herself. The officers closed the folder, satisfied. Harold cleared his throat. "The court will decide the legal consequences. But in this room, the truth has already been spoken." I leaned back, my hands folded in my lap. "I do not want noise. I do not want spectacle. I want dignity written down where no one can erase it. That is all one officer nodded. You'll have that, ma'am. The rest blurred. Papers signed, acknowledgments taken, a date set for formal proceedings. But what I remember most is the shift in the air. For weeks, I had been the quiet figure at the edge of their plans. Now, Emily and Daniel sat diminished, their voices broken under the weight of their own words. When the officers left with Carol and Harold gathered his briefcase, the house felt lighter. Not free yet, but on its way. I picked up the cup, traced the crack with my thumb, and whispered inside, not to Emily or Daniel, but to the memory of my mother. No one took my dignity. Not today. And for the first time in a long time, I believed it. The backlash did not arrive like thunder. It came as little buzzing notifications on my phone, and a knock that lingered too long on the door. Emily and Daniel had gone online. In the neighborhood Facebook group, a post appeared with a photo of me taken from the sidewalk, my robe tied in a crooked knot while I collected the mail. The caption read, "Concern for our elderly neighbor on Maple. My mother has been forgetting names and wandering. She accused us of theft today. Please call if you see her out alone." They copied the same message onto Nextdoor and the church bulletin board's digital page. They framed their lies as community care. The comments rolled in fast. Poor thing. Someone should check her stove. My aunt was like this. Bless you for taking responsibility. A woman from 3 streets over wrote that she had seen me talking to myself by the hydrangeas. I had been reciting my grocery list. Another person asked whether adult protective services should be notified. Emily replied with a sad face and said they were looking into options. By noon, the whispering had crossed our hedges. A couple on an afternoon walk slowed when I stepped onto the porch, then hurried on, their eyes busy with everything but me. A man from the neighborhood association called to ask whether I needed a wellness visit. 2 pamphlets appeared under my doormat. Home safety for seniors and memory care choices. Someone left a casserole without a note. Pity has its own weight. It can press a person down as surely as scorn. I did not argue online. I did not dignify lies with comments that could be twisted into proof of confusion. Instead, I opened my small printer, fed in paper, and made screenshots of every post, every reply, every timestamp. I saved the voicemail again in 3 places. I made a folder marked Evidence and slipped in the bank case number and Carol's signed statement. Harold's sentence returned to me like a metronome. The paper will do the shouting. My hands steadied with each page I stacked. Late afternoon, Mildred stood at my gate with her phone in her palm and her mouth set like a door on a windy day. "Have you seen this foolishness?" she asked, lifting the screen. I nodded. She lowered her voice. "Half the block believes it, half does not know what to believe, and the rest just love a story that is not theirs." "Come in," I said. I poured tea. I handed her the unchipped mug and kept the cracked cup for myself. The fracture caught the light as if it were a line drawn on purpose. Mildred watched the way I measured sugar, the way I moved, the way I set the kettle aside without flinching. She was reading me the way old friends read newspapers, looking for the part that matters. I placed the folder on the table and opened it in order. First, the bank receipt with the fraud alert and the manager's signature. Then, the safe deposit agreement. Then, the copy of the forged power of attorney with the notary date that matched the day Emily moved in. Finally, I set my phone between us and pressed play on the short clip. Emily's voice filled my kitchen, bright and chilled. "In 1 month, she'll be in the facility. The house will be ours. Mildred did not touch her tea. She closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them and met mine. I believed you before, she said, voice low and even. Now I know how to help. I do not want to fight, I said. I want air cleared. She nodded. Then we will clear it. She walked home and within the hour posted beneath Emily's thread. She did not accuse. She attested. I have lived next to Lorraine for 15 years. She is lucid, independent, and has driven me to appointments and corrected my crossword. There is an active legal investigation regarding forged documents. Please refrain from sharing private images or speculative claims. Spreading falsehoods harms real people. She added a sentence only a neighbor can write. I saw Lorraine today. She watered her tomatoes and reminded me to cover my azaleas. She is not lost. The thread slowed. A few people deleted their comments. A moderator locked the post and issued a note about defamation. On Nextdoor, the tone shifted from pitying to cautious. One person apologized privately. Another messaged to ask if I needed anything from the store. The casserole giver returned the next day, face red, and asked for the dish back without meeting my eyes. Small things, but the air moved. That evening, Mildred and I stood at the fence between our yards. The sky was the faded blue of old denim. She passed me a jar of her peach jam as if it were something stronger. You are not alone, she said, each word placed like a brick. I will say it out loud where anyone who needs to hear it can hear it. I thanked her and did not cry. I carried the jar inside and set it next to the cracked cup. Two objects that hold sweetness without pretending life is unbroken. The house felt more itself. My name felt more mine. I turned off my phone and let the notifications fall silent. Let the paper speak. Let the neighbors see. Let the truth take its own steady time. The letters came in white envelopes stamped with the seal of the United States Treasury. They were not addressed to me. They were for Emily and Daniel. But I was in the kitchen when the mail slipped through the slot, and I saw their names in the heavy block print that makes a stomach drop. They opened the first envelope at the table while I rinsed my cracked porcelain cup. Daniel's face went rigid. Emily's hands shook as she scanned the page. Audit, she whispered. They're auditing us. I kept my back turned, towel in hand, drying the cup as though nothing had changed. But inside, I understood. Harold had filed the necessary motions, and once the fraud at the county office was reported, the ripples reached farther than they had ever imagined. When you play with property deeds and falsify signatures, the IRS begins to wonder what else you have bent. The following weeks were a blur of envelopes, phone calls, and sudden silences. Agents in gray suits arrived with clipboards and laptops. They spread papers across the dining table where Emily once did her school projects. Bank transfers, undeclared income, gifts listed as deductions. All of it laid bare under fluorescent light. Emily cried often, her voice brittle. We just moved money around. Everyone does it, Daniel argued louder, blaming Carol, blaming the bank, blaming stress. The agents listened without expression, asking for receipts, dates, explanations. Each question tightened the rope. I made tea, carried it past the table, and sat in the living room. I did not speak. I did not need to. My silence was its own ledger, balanced and patient. One afternoon, I overheard the words penalty and asset seizure. The house they had wanted so desperately, my house, was no longer even in the conversation. Their own accounts were frozen, their investments flagged. The car Daniel polished every Saturday sat untouched in the driveway. now property of the government until further notice. Neighbors noticed too. The same people who once pitied me began to whisper about Emily and Daniel. Fraud, audit, court. Words travel quickly when a family's mask slips. Invitations stopped. The sympathy casseroles stopped. The smiles in church turned away. Through it all, I never raised my voice. I sat with my cracked cup, the fracture glinting in the lamplight, and let the truth move through official channels. The IRS did not need my commentary. The law did not require my anger. One evening, after the agents left with boxes of files, Emily stood in the hallway, shoulders sagging, mascara blurred. "Mom," she said, voice small, "do you hate me?" I looked at her steadily, the way my mother once looked at me when I was caught in a lie. "No," I said softly, "I do not hate you. But I cannot protect you from what you chose." She wept, but I did not step closer. Some lessons arrive only when silence holds. Daniel slammed a door. Papers rustled through the night. But the tide had turned. They were no longer predators circling my life. They were defendants, caught in their own design. I poured the last of the tea, rinsed the cup, and placed it carefully on the rack. Still cracked, still holding. Justice had arrived, line by line, in forms and penalties, in frozen accounts and tarnished reputations. I had not spoken a word to make it happen. I only chose not to vanish. That night the house felt steady, as if the floorboards had decided to hold me up a little higher. I cleared the table, set out a sheet of stationery, and placed my cracked porcelain cup at the corner like a paperweight. I did not want to text, and I did not want to argue. I wanted to say what I needed once, clean and complete. I wrote her name on top, Emily Hart. The date looked stern in the corner. My hand did not shake. I began with truth. "Dear Emily, I forgive you. Forgiveness is not permission. It is a door I open so bitterness does not take my house. I forgive you. Still, I am not returning to the place you prepared for me, whether it has soft lighting or careful nurses, or the word memory printed on the wall. I will not live where my name must be signed by someone else. I will not trade keys for schedules. I will not be kept safe by people who call safety a reason to own me. I raised you to stand up after a fall. Now I stand up for myself. You may be angry that I will not meet you in the middle. The middle is where I disappear. I am your mother, but I belong to myself. I never told you this. When you were 16, the store manager at Duffy's called me after closing. You and a friend had walked out with a silver necklace hidden in a sleeve. The police were waiting in the office. I signed a note saying the necklace was mine, and I had asked you to hold it. I paid for it in installments and apologized to a tired man with 2 jobs. I did it so your record would be clean and your road would be smooth. I carried that secret so you could carry less. I do not tell you to shame you. I tell you so you will see the whole of me, not a burden, not a problem, but the same woman who stepped between you and harm whenever harm lifted its head. I hope you heal. I hope you tell the truth to yourself before you tell it to anyone else. If one day you decide to meet me without papers or plans or excuses, I will meet you in a public place, and we will sit across a small table like 2 honest women. Until then, do not come to my door unannounced. Do not use my name to gain sympathy. Do not call my safety a reason to take my life from me. I forgive you. I release you. I keep myself. Love without surrender, Mother. I signed my name beneath those words and folded the letter slowly. The paper made a sound like a small sail catching wind. I did not put it in an envelope. Some truths need air. I carried it to the bedroom and opened the wooden box at the foot of my bed. Inside lay my mother's letter, the savings bonds, a photo of Michael sanding the porch, and a ribbon from Emily's kindergarten field day. I placed my letter atop my mother's and closed the lid with both hands. In the kitchen, I washed the cracked cup and set it to dry. I thought of the words I had swallowed in the name of peace. Here is the truth. I did not survive by being unbreakable, but by repairing what mattered. I forgive you, Emily, and I will not return. I am here, finally mine at last. The decision to sell the house came quietly, not as defeat, but as release. I walked through each room one last time. The kitchen where I pawned rings and paid bills, the porch where Emily once braided her doll's hair, the narrow hallway that had carried both laughter and whispers. The walls did not weep. They stood calm, as if saying, "You gave us your years, now give yourself a chance." I listed the house with a modest agent and watched strangers step across the threshold, measuring the space for their own lives. I did not cling. When the papers were signed, I slipped the keys into an envelope and left it on the counter. My cracked porcelain cup was the only object I carried in my purse that day. It had survived more storms than any wall. The senior apartment complex overlooked a park with a duck pond and benches in the shade. The building smelled faintly of lemon polish, but it did not pretend. Here, no one plotted over deeds or whispered about facilities. People came and went with laundry baskets and crossword books. Life, pared down, but not erased. My apartment had a small balcony where I set a chair and a plant Mildred gave me before I moved. The first evening, I brewed tea and poured it into the cracked cup. Steam rose steady and the water held. Always, the water held. Within weeks, I learned names. There was Gloria, who crocheted blankets in colors loud enough to laugh at sorrow. Richard, who quoted baseball scores from decades past. And June, who played piano in the lounge every Wednesday night. They welcomed me without question, but after I fixed a leaky faucet in the community kitchen and organized the mail slots, they began to call me Big Sister. The title made me smile. I had not been anyone's sister in years, but the word felt right. A role earned by age and steadiness, not stolen by deceit. One afternoon, Gloria knocked with a tray of muffins. "We vote you head of our Friday discussion group," she said. "You keep us honest." I accepted, not because I craved authority, but because the circle of chairs, the nodding heads, felt like the right kind of family. Sometimes, when the group debated politics or memories of old TV shows, I sat back and touched the cup beside me. The fracture along its rim glinted like a scar. People asked why I kept such a flawed thing. I only said, "It still holds water," and they nodded, understanding more than words explained. At night, I opened the wooden box on my dresser. My mother's letter lay under mine, paper resting on paper, like two hands folded. I did not reread them often. I did not need to. Their truth lived in me now, guiding without weight. I no longer feared vanishing. I no longer feared silence. In this new place, surrounded by voices that asked nothing but presence, I felt seen again. Not as a burden, not as an obstacle, as Lorraine, whole, cracked, and holding. The letter arrived on a Tuesday, addressed in Emily's neat print. No return address, only my name and the apartment number, as if it already knew my hands. I set it on the table beside my cracked porcelain cup and waited until the tea cooled. I had promised myself I would not chase apologies. Still, I opened it slowly, like a door you are unsure of. I breathed once, slid a finger under the flap, and felt the paper sigh in relief. "Dear Mom," it began, "I do not expect forgiveness. I only hope you are happy. Therapy is stripping away the excuses I built. I keep replaying the voice message, and the day the officers came. I wanted comfort without cost, control without honesty. I called it care. It was greed. I am ashamed." She wrote about Daniel, fear to blame, money confused with safety, secrets rotting the floor. She admitted to the forged forms, the pressure on Carol, the posts online. "I hurt you in public and in private," she wrote. "I tried to make other people carry a lie that belonged to me. I am sorry for the noise I made, and more sorry for the quiet I stole from you." I read every line once, then again. My heartbeat stayed calm enough. I traced the crack and kept reading. "Mom, when I was 16, you appeared at Duffy's and said the necklace was yours. You saved me. I carried that night like a secret medal. I told myself your sacrifices gave me permission to take more. I see it now. Love is not a debit card. You are a person, not a resource. If my letter can return even a thread of dignity I tried to cut, let it return." She wrote she was paying taxes and fines. Daniel had moved out, and she had taken a job once beneath her pride. "Consequences are a language I finally understand," she said. "I am not writing to ask for visits or holidays. I am writing because truth should not arrive only in court filings. You deserve to hear it from me. I was wrong." There were smaller confessions, plain and odd. She missed the smell of my kitchen on Sundays. She still used the laundry tips I taught her. She kept the paper crown from Daniel's birthday and could not look at it without shaking. "I wanted your house like a life raft," she wrote. "I forgot you were the one still swimming." The letter ended simply. "I will not call or knock. If one day you want coffee somewhere public, I will be there at whatever time you name. If that day never comes, I will still be grateful that you are in the world. I do not expect forgiveness. I only hope you are happy. Love, Emily." I placed the pages on the table and looked out at the park. A boy tossed bread. It floated, then sank, and the water closed without fuss. I folded the letter along its creases and rose. In the bedroom, I opened the wooden box. My mother's letter lay beneath the one I wrote and never sent. I set Emily's on top, paper on paper like a bridge. I did not feel triumph. I felt a measured warmth, the kind that gathers without burning. Bittersweet is the right word. Something lost, something mended. I touched the box lid and whispered, "Be well, child." Then I returned to the kitchen, poured fresh tea into the cracked cup, and watched the steam rise, steady and bright, only as long as needed. Morning finds me on the balcony with the park waking below. My chair faces the pond. The ducks draw small question marks across the water. In my hands, the cracked porcelain cup warms my palms. Coffee, not tea today. The air is clean, and for once, so is the inside of my head. Across the courtyard, June starts the slow stretch of her Wednesday routine, palms rising like sunrise. Gloria follows, laughing at her own balance, bright scarf fluttering. Richard counts softly from the bench, pretending he is a coach and we are all trying out for a gentle team. Someone waters geraniums. Someone opens a paperback to the folded page. It is an ordinary scene that feels like a blessing. I look down at the cup. The fracture along the rim catches light, a thin silver river that refuses to swallow me. There were months when I thought one crack meant collapse. Now I know better. Broken is not the same as gone. Wounded is not the same as weak. The cup still holds heat, So do I. Sometimes I hear my mother as clearly as when she stood at the laundry sink. Dignity, my girl, cannot be taken. It can be surrendered, it can be traded, but it cannot be stolen. Hold it the way you hold a full cup, steady and close. When I forgot, paper and patience helped me remember. Not noise, not spectacle. Paper and patience. From here, the old house is a story, not a place. I see a porch where a young husband sanded boards, a kitchen where a little girl learned to braid, a hallway that held whispers that never belonged to me. I released the keys and kept myself. If you have ever been asked to trade your name for someone else's comfort, you know why that matters. My wooden box rests on the dresser inside, the lid closed without effort. 2 letters lie there, my mother's and mine, and now Emily's apology on top, a small bridge built of paper instead of promises. I do not touch the box today. I do not need to. Forgiveness holds better when it is not handled every hour. The courtyard fills with the soft rhythm of friends who have learned the shape of their days. Somebody waves up at me and mouths, "Big sister." I raise my cup in reply. We are a small, stubborn choir singing without instruments. We know what it costs to begin again at the age people expect you to end. We sing anyway. I think about thresholds, the pawn shop door where I traded gold for a choir trip, the laundromat door I walked through for a second shift, the glass door I refused at the facility, the door of my own house closing behind officers and lies. Doors are choices disguised as edges. You do not have to cross every one. You are allowed to turn, breathe, and keep what is yours. If one day you hear a familiar voice cut straight into your heart, what will you do? Will you vanish to keep the peace, or will you stand in the doorway of yourself and say no with a steady hand? I did not win by shouting. I won by staying, by writing, by choosing the quiet that tells the truth. Before we say goodbye, we would love to know. Where are you watching from? Is it a quiet morning with a warm cup of coffee? Or a late night where stories like this keep you company? Let us know in the comments. We read every one with gratitude. And if this story touched your heart, please consider subscribing to the channel, not just to hear more stories like this, but to be part of a community that still believes in kindness, healing, and second chances. Thank you for spending your time with us today. Wherever you are, we hope you carry this story with you. And remember, sometimes the miracle does not knock on your door. It waits quietly until you are ready to open your heart. Take care, and we will see you in the next story.